It's a really, really, really great question, and I wish I had all of the answers for you. But I certainly think that we need to really start to create environments that allow women to share their voice and allow women to come to the table. We really need to make sure that we have this real balance of gender around the table. And I think that as women, we need to start to be the change that we want to see. So I always talk about all change starts with us. So we can't put our head in the sand and say, well, it's not my job to bring new women, women through leadership ranks. It actually is all of our jobs. And that starts with us behaving in the way that we want to see leadership in the future.
If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where you're going to get the latest episode, the best content, and be sure to log in to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Hey, I'm Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience, and achievement of women from all walks of life. In each episode, I pose questions to my guests to peel away the layers to reveal the knowledge and the experience that shapes their narrative. So if you're feeling unseen, unheard, or simply looking for inspiration, then the Power of Women podcast is a great place to join the conversation. So today we're going to dive into some leadership stuff, and in today's rapidly evolving business landscape, the archetypal CEO is associated with formal education, and when we think of that, we often think of the MBA. However, many successful CEOs have forged their path through non-traditional academic study. This shift underscores the critical truth that leadership is more about other skills other than just academic credentials. It involves vision, resilience, emotional intelligence, and the ability to adapt to a rapidly changing environment. Which brings me to today's guest, who actually left school at 16. She's a modern thought leader and founder of Mentor Me Women, former retail director who for over a decade served as the CEO of iconic brands Sportsgirl and Suzanne, and latterly has become a publisher of 2 books. Colleen Callander, welcome to the Power of Women podcast.
Oh, good morning, and thank you so much for having me here today. It really is wonderful to be here with you, Di.
Great. Colleen, I like to start to get to know somebody with a couple of opening questions. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Geelong. I loved growing up down there, by the way. I was born there. I lived in Geelong, in the city of Geelong, pretty much my whole life until I think I moved up to Melbourne when I was about 30. Even though I worked up there, I couldn't bring myself to leave. And I had my mum and my dad and my older brother, younger sister, and had a really wonderful, wonderful childhood down there.
Well, there you go. That's where I grew up too.
Okay.
Didn't know that.
We didn't know that.
No, we didn't. We didn't compare notes before today. So we've got that in common. And I left when I was 17 to go to uni. So there we go.
Great.
So what family values did you garner from your childhood, Colleen?
I think so many, Diane. If I think about my mum and my dad, I think I sort of really gained different values from both of them, even though we had these sort of collective family values. And my father migrated to Australia from Italy when he was 4. So his values were all about hard work and never giving up and resilience. And so I really took a lot of that through my sort of childhood and then into my leadership journey. And then my mother was from a very different background. She was one of 12 children. And so her values that she really instilled in me were kindness and nurturing and authenticity and love, I suppose. And so I feel very blessed to have learnt these incredible values from each of them, both quite differently. And I really do still today, even in my 50s, very much credit my upbringing and my parents for the leader and the woman that I am today. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's great. I think Christmas must be a pretty big affair in your family with your mother's side.
Well, it's really funny when you have that many children, and in those days, everyone sort of tends to go in their own different directions. But my brother has 6 children, my sister has 2, I have 3, so we still have quite a big family.
Yeah, you're a big
just
clan.
with us, just with us.
Yeah, that's great. So, Colleen, in keeping with today's introduction, let's start with your thoughts on the obvious, if we could. Is studying a tertiary degree an imperative when you've got senior leadership aspirations?
It's such a great question, and one that I get asked a lot because, it's a very different sort of place I went, I suppose, not finishing school and leaving at 16. And I really believe, Di, that while, studying and tertiary degrees can be really valuable, I don't necessarily think they're imperative for senior leadership success, and certainly not in my journey. And, I often think about great leaders and entrepreneurs that haven't followed that traditional path. We think of Richard Branson or Oprah Winfrey or Bill Gates or Ralph Lauren, all incredible entrepreneurs. None of them finished school. So, I think about it more about that hard work, those values my father instilled in me. And certainly I think about it as the willingness to try, because when we try, we succeed, fail, or somewhere in between. And I don't think it really matters where we land as we go through our leadership journey. We learn, we build skills, we build competency, we gain confidence, but that all starts with just taking that first step to try. So, I really believe that those leadership skills come as we experience life, as we build resilience, as we build self-awareness along the way. So I've always really thought about great leadership and becoming a leader as the ability to really inspire and influence and impact people around us. And that they were really my 3 leadership words. And they're the questions I ask myself every single day. Have I inspired people to achieve more? Have I positively influenced people's behavior? Have I made a lasting impact on people? And you don't need an education to do that. You don't need a tertiary degree. So for me, it was a very different path, but one that really suited me and worked out well, I suppose.
And I had an entrepreneurial father who left school in year 10, same, and went on to all sorts of heights, including politics. So it doesn't necessarily apply, and I agree. So without the benefit of hindsight of perhaps the learnings and the strategic insights that come from academic study, tell me about how you acquired those skills outside of that framework. And was it simply in situ learning? Did you have coaches? How did it come about for you?
I think even though there was no sort of formal education, I really think of myself as this lifelong learner. I think we never ever stop learning through life. And, for me, it was very much learning through lived experiences, through learning through others. As you said, having great mentors around me, surrounding myself with people that inspired me, but also challenged me. I think, I'm a very curious person, so I stayed curious all the time. I was always very inquisitive and as I went through, we have lots of resources, particularly today. I love reading. I love listening to podcasts. I love learning. So I've never stopped that. But I think it's really interesting to think about how different people learn. And for me, I very much learnt by doing and experiencing things rather than someone telling me what I needed to do. So yeah, very different path.
So as a leader, how did you navigate the balance between being confident in your abilities, especially and if self-doubt actually crept in at any point along the way?
Well, I think we all have that self-doubt. I don't think any of us escape that self-doubt or inner critic that we all have. And I think for me and for all of us, this is sort of a lifelong work in progress when we think about confidence. We often look at leaders, Di, and think, wow, they're so confident and, they're so experienced, but we all suffer from this self-sabotage or self-doubt. So, but for me, I think really the key to overcoming that really sort of lies in that self-awareness piece, that really understanding who I am at the core, having this really strong sense of purpose, I should say, and, knowing that we don't need to be perfect because that actually doesn't exist. We just need to, I believe, really stay in line with our values. And, I always talk about showing up as my most authentic self. And I think that's where people really shine, when they have that great self-awareness and they show up very authentically.
You said before you're in your 50s now, Colleen. I would assume that level of confidence of showing up and overcoming self-doubt wasn't always there. When did you really come into your own?
Yeah, I think that it's just through experience and resilience and learning and falling over and getting up again that we build that confidence muscle. And it is a muscle. Confidence isn't something we're born with. Confidence is something that we learn as we go through life and we experience new things and situations. So I don't think there's been a defining moment that I've gone, wow, I've now got the confidence. I think there's been this constant growth and development and self-awareness where I've told myself, have the willingness to try, step outside of your comfort zone. What's the worst thing that can happen? Succeed, fail, somewhere in between. It doesn't really matter. So I don't ever think we get to a moment where we cross that line and say, I'm there. I think we are just this ever evolving humans that are working on our confidence all the time and building that confidence muscle.
And you've done a career shift of late, as have I. Do you find you've got the same confidence muscle in what you're doing now as what you were doing as a retail leader, or is that still an evolving and developing quality in the work that you're doing today?
Yes, I think it's still a evolving, developing quality. But I think what's happening today is that I'm taking those 30 years of retail knowledge and leadership and sharing that with other people. And that's a really great thing to do. And it does build your confidence, because I think sometimes, Di, we don't know how much we really know until we start sharing with other people. So I think sharing is a really incredible way to build your own confidence, because it does really solidify that we have put in the work and we do know what we're talking about. And of course, we don't have all the answers all the time, but I think this next chapter in my life where I'm sharing is just even a more fabulous way to build that confidence. And for me, I've always really embraced watching other people grow, watching other people shine. And in this next chapter, that's really what's happening for me. And so that's a real confidence boost as well. So, but I think we are always evolving, always learning, and always building that confidence muscle, building resilience. I don't think we ever stop. And when we do, that's probably when we're ready to leave the planet, because I think we are always going to be lifelong learners.
Yeah. So leadership often involves making some pretty tough decisions, and particularly in retail, it's an incredibly commercially driven space of things are often measured in the day-to-day in retail. But two parts to my question: how do you manage self-doubt when faced with high-stake decisions? And those high-stake decisions might be around people, it might be around business. Can you share some examples of that for us?
I think it's really important to trust your own instincts. And I've always had a very, very strong gut intuition. And I also align all of my decisions to my values. So I think those couple of things combined, so that gut feeling and that gut instinct combined with my values and living in line with them, has really allowed me to make, a lot of the right decisions. And I also think, Di, that it's also about having the right people around you and creating the right teams and building trust within your team. Because as a CEO, as a leader, it doesn't really matter who you are or what you do. We don't have all the answers all the time, and neither should we. And so I think for myself as a CEO and a great leader, that I allowed other people to share and to be the experts in their field and to contribute and have a voice and share their expertise. And I think that's what makes you a great leader and makes you a great CEO, because, as I said, we don't all have the answers. And a CEO shouldn't have all the answers. And a lot of them think they should. And I think that's where they go wrong. We create these incredible teams of people and hire these people with incredible expertise, but then we tell them what to do and try and make decisions for them. And I just don't think that works in organizations. So I've always been someone to bring in incredible talent and then allow the whole team to shine, which then allows you to shine. But very much my decisions will always come back to my values. They're the boss. I talk about my values as the boss. That's who I show up to. That's who I report into every day. And that's how I make all of the decisions, whether it be personally or professionally.
The buck stops with you as the CEO at the end of the day. So how do you ensure you've got confidence in that final decision that you make?
I think, again, if I think about not even as CEO, just as a human, we have to have solid foundations for ourselves. We have to have great self-awareness. If I think about the successful leaders I've ever met, one of the things they all have in common is great self-awareness. And so for me, I've always been working on those foundations of myself, my self-awareness, my values, my purpose. And I really do think when we have those solid foundations of ourself, then we can make those decisions with confidence. And when we make those decisions with confidence, we feel really in control, and we have a lot more clarity around that decision making and around the way we share those decisions. So again, I think it does come back to having really solid foundations for yourself and your own self-belief.
Though I would imagine there are still times when you will second guess yourself.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
How do you get past that?
I think it's, again, coming back to really asking yourself, do I believe in this decision that I'm making? And I think it's about the way we change that narrative. I often say, I've got this, you know this stuff. You've done this before. You're a great leader. I would always say to my team, when you're coming in to present and people are nervous, I'm like, what are you nervous about? You know your stuff. Just lean back on that. Lean back on the hard work that you've put in. Lean back on the experiences. Lean back on your successes and your failures, because I always say success leaves clues and so does failures. So let's lean into those, because that's where we'll find the right answers. So again, and whenever I walk in and make a decision, I think, what's the worst thing that can happen if it goes wrong? We're not saving lives at the end of the day. So, but believe in that decision that you're making and lean on that expertise and all of that history that you already have.
I really like that phrase, success leaves clues, and failure would leave clues as well. How do you tap in and look into that? Because looking back at the clues for success, I imagine, is far more comfortable than looking back at the clues of failure, because you might want to block those out. So how do you grasp that fabulous trail of information that you've got to as a resource?
Yes, I think it's about really being a person and a leader who is happy to reflect. And I certainly do that. And I'm always asking myself, what did I do really well? But how can I do that better? Or if I didn't do something so well, what did I actually learn from that? Because I actually think we learn more from failure than we do from success at the end of the day. So, but I do think that a lot of people don't want that self-reflection, because self-reflection is uncomfortable. It's just like self-awareness is uncomfortable. So I think people need to get very comfortable. And if you want to be a great leader, you need to get very comfortable asking yourself, where did I go wrong and what can I take from that experience? Because that's really what is shaping us into being a great leader.
Yeah, thank you. So coming up, we're going to look more at women in the workforce and also hear more about your new business, Mentor Me Women. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. So, Colleen, women, particularly in fashion retail, make up a really significant part of the workforce, as we know. So therefore, we can confidently say that women play a crucial role in the retail sectors. The numbers tell us that. But how do we bring more women through the senior ranks of leadership?
It's a really, really, really great question. And I wish I had all of the answers for you. But I certainly think that we need to really start to create environments that allow women to share their voice and allow women to come to the table. We really need to make sure that we have this real balance of gender around the table. And I think that as women, we need to start to be the change that we want to see. So I always talk about all change starts with us. So we can't put our head in the sand and say, well, it's not my job to bring new women, women through leadership ranks. It actually is all of our jobs. And that starts with us behaving in the way that we want to see leadership in the future. So, I really think that it is about creating places where women can learn and collaborate and share and nurture and bring their expertise to the table. And that's a challenging thing to do. So, as I said, I think we need to be the change that we want to see. We need to start to promote women. We need to create environments that allow women to come back to work and really have this work-life balance that allows them to show up as the best version of themselves. So there's quite a lot of changes that I think are happening but need to continue to happen to really make that shift.
And obviously one of those big issues is time out for having children. What do we need to do to change employers' view on how we integrate that? Because I have no doubt that you know that the working mums have probably been the best workers and the most dedicated in your workforce. But how do we change the mindset of employers? Because clearly that's not a view held across the board at this point in time.
No, it definitely isn't. And I think that we need to get employers to think about the human first. And the person that is the mum and that has children, the one that turns up to the doorstep every day at work, is not two different people. So we need to allow women to be the best outside of the work environment, so they can show up to work as the best version of themselves. And that really means creating flexible work cultures. So, really, and that starts with trust. And I think that's where the problem lies with a lot of leaders, is there is no trust in people. So I think it really starts with changing that narrative and creating the environment that allows people to build trust. I also think, the more women we have in those leadership roles, the more women we will have in those leadership roles. So, we need to just start to make those changes, because I also say that we like to recruit like-minded people, right? We like to have friends that are like-minded. So women will start to nurture and develop and create environments that are much more conducive to female leaders. So I think we have to just start pushing those numbers and pushing those changes. I think organizations need to embrace a much better life in balance for people. And, we've always talked about work-life balance. I don't think about it like that really, because I don't believe we put work into one box and life into another. They actually have to coexist. As I said, we are the one person, we are human first. So I think organizations really need to start to embrace, how can we create environments that allow this really nice life in balance for people? Because when people have life in balance, they come to work with full tanks. They come to work with much more clarity on what they need to do for the day. They have a much more fulfilled work life, because their life outside is much more fulfilled and they have much more balance in what they're doing. So I really think there is a huge amount of work to do, but it really does start with changing that culture.
You're a mum and you've been a CEO. you obviously made that work, your work environment clearly allowed that to work. And I don't for a moment suggest that was all smooth sailing. But how did you do it?
Yeah, I very much surrounded myself with my cheer squad. So, I had people around me that loved me and wanted to support me. And sometimes we don't have those people in our lives. So, I had a great husband. I had my mum who was incredible. As the kids got a bit bigger, I had a great nanny who was with me for, nearly 10 years. So I think we have to, as women, we can't do it all on our own. And for so long, I thought I could. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want to do any of that. And we hit burnout, and I'm sure we'll touch on that today. But for me, it was about surrounding myself with, great people that wanted to love and support me and watch me do well. So I think that's the number one step to actually start with.
That's interesting, because I imagine that there would be so many people who would feel that they didn't want to defer to others and share the load, because A-type personalities and CEOs kind of run in concert.
True.
So yeah,
absolutely. And we're perfectionists, right?
Yeah.
I think if you're in a CEO role, or we're perfectionists, we're A-type, overachieving, achievement junkies. So those people don't ever ask for help. They don't ever show want to show weakness, not readily. That's right. It's really hard. So I had to really learn that as a skill, because I was that person. I'm a people pleaser as well. So you put that in the mix, and that's a real recipe for disaster and burnout. So very much I had to learn this skill of saying, you don't have to be perfect. You can ask for help, and you don't have to say yes all the time. You're allowed to say no as well. So it was very much a journey for me to make those changes.
Yeah, and I think delegating from a professional perspective was a skill that you developed, but delegating in your personal life, they're two different things.
Yes, they are. And even in the work environment, from a young age, I thought, well, I have to do everything. If I don't do it, it's not going to be done right. That was kind of that early stage of leadership for me. And what you learn as you go through life is that that's actually not true. And the more you delegate, the better leader you become. But that's only because the people around you are becoming better as well. So delegation is, again, one of those things that I really had to learn as I went through that leadership journey. It wasn't something that came naturally to me at the start, but as you do it, you see the benefits of doing that. And then, of course, anything where you see the benefit, you want to do it more.
So coming back to what you're doing now, Colleen, did you establish Mentor Me Women with all of these points that we've touched on in mind?
It actually, to be honest, I really sort of just came out of nowhere, to be honest. When I finished in my CEO role, it was in line with COVID. And so that was kind of a bit of a blessing for me, I suppose. It made me sort of stop and take a breath, because, I don't think I'd taken a breath for a long time. But during that time, that first sort of COVID lockdown, and, in Victoria particularly, I had all of these women calling me. Some I knew, some I'd never, ever met in my life. And it was a really, really challenging time for everyone, particularly women, because, we're now in our homes, we're trying to work, we're homeschooling, and our husbands are now working from home, and our homes are our sanctuary. They've now become our workplace and our kindergartens and our schools. So women were really struggling with that, and it really knocked a lot of women's confidence as well during that time. So for me, Mentor Me started more out of a necessity to support women. And it was really all about making mentoring affordable and accessible for women. So I really saw this need to bring women together and to share and to mentor, and for women to mentor each other. And I started this as a 4-week program. Always locked down, we're locked down. There's nothing we can do in Victoria. And so it was 1 hour a week for 4 weeks, and I had women just sign up. And I thought this was great. And I had so much incredible feedback. And then they'd tell other women, then other women would contact me. So this became something I did every month. And then I had organizations contacting me saying, can you run this for our women's network? Can you come into our organization? And the number one
Truly
thing
organic.
Very, very organic. And I thought I would just do that through COVID. And it was really this gift that I was giving to others, but it was actually more a gift I was giving to myself, because I didn't have my big team around me. I didn't have all of these incredible women around me that I saw every day as a CEO, but I now had this other tribe of women that I was impacting and influencing and inspiring in a different way. So it was very, very organic. And as I said, I thought I'd finish it at the end of COVID, and I still do Mentor Me today as a public program, but also with organizations and women's networks. And it really, truly is a gift.
Well done. So you've got a couple of key areas that I know you're passionate about, and they feed into this. And the first one is kindness. Why does kindness drive you?
Kindness is my favorite word in the world, and it's one of my values, and it's definitely the way I live my life, both personally and professionally. And I, from a very young age, during my leadership journey, my life journey, I was always very intrigued by people's behavior. What made some people create environments of collaboration and others environments of fear? Why were some people generous and others greedy? Why were some people cruel and others kind? And so for me, throughout my journey, I was really becoming this leader by design, which is the name of the title of my first book, as you know, creating the leader I wanted to be, creating the person that I wanted to be. And
did you see all of those things in the workplace? I mean, cruel and kind and all of, did you see all of that?
Absolutely. Generous, greedy, collaboration, fear, caring, cruel. That was everywhere, my 30 years of retail. And so for me, the word that kept coming back to me was kindness. And as I said, it's been my value for over 15, 20 years. And for me, coming through the ranks of leadership, to me, kindness was a weakness. And we still think about that today. A lot of people think about kindness as a weakness. I very much changed that narrative as kindness became my value and my decision-making tool. And for me, kindness was going to be my superpower, and kindness was my superpower. Kindness was a strength. And I always talk about kindness as, a lot of people think it's people can do what they like. There are no rules or boundaries. It's a free for all. For me, kindness became this real driving force and this real passion, that kindness was about creating environments where people could share their voice. Kindness was about setting very clear expectations for people. Kindness was about giving people honest feedback. Kindness was about building true human connections. And as I went through my journey, I could see that this kindness, this superpower that I had, was actually creating incredible organizations that people wanted to show up to and give me their blood, sweat, and tears, because I created this environment that I called a circle of safety. And when I talk about the circle of safety, it doesn't mean, are people safe? Of course, we want people to be safe in our organizations. That circle of safety meant, can people turn up as their most authentic self? Can they share their voice? Can they step out of their comfort zone? Can they take risks without being thrown under the bus? When you lead with kindness, you can create an incredible organization, and people will do amazing things. They will do things that you never, ever thought that they could do when you lead with kindness.
Can you deliver a really tough message in a kind way?
Absolutely, you can. You can set people free with kindness. Sometimes people are just not right for that role, or sometimes people need the feedback that actually allows them to push further or step outside of their comfort zone or step sideways to go forwards. And we can deliver those conversations in such a kind way, where we are having this conversation because I actually really care about you and I want to see you do super well. But this isn't the right path for you, or it's not the right path today.
So the kindness could simply be the message of, we're calling time on it.
Absolutely. We can deliver every message with kindness. And I've had people that I've had some very, very tough conversations with. And as a CEO, we have to have tough conversations, right? I've had tough conversations with kindness where people at the end have said, Col, I just really want to thank you for that conversation. I really needed that. And no one's ever had that with me. You're the first person to have that kind, honest conversation. And that's what allows people to shine. That's what allows people to grow.
The second part of that question around key areas that you're passionate about, I know burnout and self-care are on that list. Did you ever experience burnout?
I did. And I think a lot of CEOs, as we said, perfectionists, A-type, overachieving personalities will experience burnout at some time in their life. And my burnout came in 2007. And I was 36 years of age. I had 3 young children under the age of 10. I was general manager of Sports Girl at the time. I absolutely loved my job. I thought it just is never going to get better than this. General manager of Sports Girl, and my career was going gangbusters. And I hit a wall. I actually had nothing left in my tank. And I describe myself in my book as the red Ferrari. But this red Ferrari had never pulled into the pits, never put air in the tires, never put petrol in the tank. This Ferrari never wanted to leave the track. She wanted to just keep going faster and faster and faster, and wanted a personal best every day. Right?
How did it manifest itself? What were the symptoms? What were the things that happened?
Yeah, well, when I talk about hitting a wall, that's literally what I felt like. I felt like I just hit a wall. I had nothing left in the tank. It happens with brain, you have constant brain fog. You can't make decisions. You feel constantly exhausted. It doesn't matter how much Netflix or R&R you have, your tank just doesn't fill up. If we have a really big week and we get to the end of the week and we have a bit of Netflix and we refill our tank and we have a bit of time out, we feel great again by Monday. Well, burnout doesn't work like that. It's like putting water into a bucket with holes in it. Nothing stays. So, for me, I had to really change my life. So I remember this one night I said to my husband, I'm done. 36 years of age, 3 kids, great career. I've got nothing left in the tank. And I actually went in the next day to resign. And lucky for me, I got talked out of that idea. My boss said, well, that's not going to happen. What can we do? And so I actually took 3.5 months off, and it was from the November to the February. And I completely changed the way I live my life. I put the red Ferrari in for that service that it had been long needing. I learned to build self-care into my life. I had no self-care as a female and as a mother. To me, self-care was selfish. How dare I do anything self-care? I have a team of people. I have children. I have a husband. I have a house to run. And so I had to change that narrative. I got myself a coach. I created a life in balance. I learnt boundaries, which I had none. Overachievers don't often have boundaries.
Said yes to everything.
I said yes to everything. So I really had to change the way I live my life. And again, I talk about burnout today as my gift. And it's now a gift I can give to other people to allow them to see the signs when you're on that burnout train, to then implement changes into your life to make sure you either get off that train or don't get on it in the first place. So it really did allow me to live my life differently. And I then went back, became the CEO of Suzanne and then Sports Girl. And I was CEO for 13 years, high performing, still an achievement junkie, but I did it with no burnout.
With none. Yeah.
No burnout.
So what would you suggest were 2 or 3 of the key strategies in actually defining what they were that kept that framework around you and held you up for that decade or so?
Yes. I think the number one thing I would say to your listeners and to anyone is to set boundaries, because boundaries are about protecting the asset, and the asset is you. You are the most important person in this world, and no one is ever going to tap you on the shoulders and say, hey, take a break, stop doing that, set some boundaries for yourself. So we really need to set boundaries for ourselves, because if we don't, someone else will set them for us and we won't like them because they're not on our terms. So the big thing was boundaries. What time do I start? What time do I finish? I just was around the clock 24/7. I didn't sleep very much at all. Now for me, sleep is the most restorative thing I can have in my life because it fills my tank up overnight, right? So I really had to set those boundaries, start, finish. I had to set boundaries around getting really comfortable saying no because, again, I love saying yes. I still love saying yes today. But often people pleasers who say yes all the time, that works out really well for the other person. It doesn't work out so well for the person saying yes. So I had to learn to say no. Today, one of the big things is technology boundaries. Probably not so much for myself. I'm pretty good with it, but, most people are plugged in 24/7. That is a recipe for burnout. So, really thinking about when do we open up to the world and then when do we close down? So for me as a CEO, when I got home at night, when I walked through the door and put my key in the door, that was really my trigger. So I would set these little things up for myself to triggers to know these are the things that have to change. So as soon as I would get home, put my key in the door, I would say to myself, Cole, you are not a CEO, because behind that door, no one actually cares. No one cares. Your kids don't care if you're a CEO. Your husband doesn't care if you're a CEO. They just want a nurturing mum and a fun wife to walk through that door. So it was a real trigger to say, take your CEO hat off, get through that door and, really enjoy what's behind that door, because that is probably the most important meeting of your whole day. So I'd say boundaries is probably the number one thing that we need to really implement if we don't want to end up in burnout town.
Yeah, one word, but there's a lot in that bucket.
Yes, absolutely.
A hell of a lot. Yeah, great. So as an experienced CEO who has led large workforces, which retail is, of women, how can female leaders support and uplift other females?
It's another really great question. And I think the thing I would start by saying is that there is enough room in this world for every woman to have success. So this is not about competition. And I still think there's a few barriers we need to break down in that area.
There's a whole podcast of another conversation.
Absolutely, there is. And, I very much have built my leadership life around supporting women and lifting women up. And I've seen what happens when you do that. But we really have to stop competing with each other. We have to understand that the more we lift each other up, the more collaborative we are, the more we share, the more powerful and stronger we are standing together. So for me, I've always said, I don't ever compete with anyone in this world. I'm not competing against another woman. At the end of the day, the only person I compete with every day is myself. And that's the only person I'm trying to impress as well every day is myself. So
how long did it take you to get there in reality, if you look back?
I think it took a long time. I think it probably was only maybe in my 40s, leading into my 50s that really changed. Because, again, A-type personalities, you only have one track, and that is your own, and that is to win and to go fast, So, but what I saw was the more we lifted each other up, the more we supported each other, the more beneficial and the more people grew and the better results we get, so but that does take a long time, and I do think there's a lot of work still to do there. So and I think the other thing too, Di, is to build in these mentorships into our organizations and these sort of supportive structures that allow women to buddy up with other women and share and learn and collaborate. And, I work with companies today that still work in silos. One part of the organization doesn't even talk to the other part of the organization, we need to break those barriers down. It's really crazy that we're, in this 2024 and we're still having companies operate in silos and not share.
Well, I think there's still leaders out there who their leadership style is to peg people against each other, and competition can be healthy, but it can be incredibly destructive in a culture.
Oh, absolutely. And you are right. There are still so many leaders out there that behave in that way. And I think it is very, very destructive. I think the other thing if I sort of round that out, I think the other thing we need to do is celebrate success as well. And I think as women, particularly, we don't celebrate success enough. And I think the more we celebrate success within our, women's networks and with each other, the more powerful we become, because it's like, again, it's like that confidence muscle. We get stronger with it. And when we celebrate that success, it allows us to go to the next level, to build on that success and try something bigger and harder and better. And, men often, I would say, men don't have trouble celebrating their success.
Yeah, I think
right?
you're right. They've that comes naturally to them. Where
Very naturally.
we feel taking time out to celebrate is actually taking time off the job.
Yes. Yeah. Men don't care. They'll go and play golf all afternoon where, if we go and take a few hours, we're like, oh gosh, should I do that? Do I feel guilty? And we just shouldn't. So I really encourage women to celebrate their success and celebrate the small things, because those small things build to big things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really valuable. So, Colleen, if I was to ask you one final question through the lens of power of women, mind you, I think all of our discussion today has been through the lens of power of women. If you were to pay forward all the knowledge and wisdom that you have amassed, and there's been plenty of that, what would be the most important message you'd leave our listeners with today?
I would say to every one of your amazing women listening to this podcast right now to believe in yourself, because there will be people throughout your life journey and your leadership journey that will tell you you're not good enough. You're not going to get it done. Someone's done it before you. You're not worthy. You're not smart enough. You're not old enough. Whatever it may be, whatever that story is, people will try and cut you down. And I'm going to tell you not to believe in any of that, to believe in yourself, because you are amazing. You can do and be anything that you want to be. If you want to put in the work, if you want to really believe in yourself and have that willingness to try. So do not believe in the narrative that other people are creating for you. Do not believe in the story that they're writing for you. Believe in your own story. Write that story for yourself. And that story needs to be one of self-belief.
Yeah, fantastic. And surround yourself with people who support that. So I think that's
Absolutely.
a great message. Thank you, Colleen. So how does somebody find you if they're looking to engage your services?
Sure. I'm on all the usual channels. So Colleen Callander on LinkedIn, Colleen Callander on Instagram, or you can jump on my website, which is www.colleencallander.com.au. So, and I hope to connect with some of your listeners and connect again with you, Di. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and thank you for creating this incredible podcast and bringing on so many amazing women that all have a different story to tell, because we all have our own stories. But you're creating this incredible platform for women to share and lift each other up and do some of those things that we were talking about. So thank you to you.
Thank you. And thank you. And that's my way of mentoring in the same vein as you've developed a platform for that. And I think it's incumbent on all of us who've had great careers and have the confidence and ability to speak out to do so. So the more of us, the better. It's a collective.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us today. I think if I take away and summarize some of those key things that I need to remind myself as much as reminding listeners, I think setting boundaries is that really, really big one. Getting comfortable with saying no, and don't be misconceived that being kind is not being strong. It's quite the opposite. Kindness and strength go hand in hand, and I think that's a really powerful message that I'd like to reiterate from today's discussion. So thank you. So if you enjoyed today's episode of Power of Women, be sure to share it with somebody else, because that's all part of our mentoring platform. Similarly to Colleen, you can follow me on all of the socials on LinkedIn, Facebook, and on Instagram. You can also jump on my website, powerofwomen.com.au, where you'll find other great episodes that you might like to share as part of your mentoring journey with some of those in your immediate network. Until next time.